So obviously this process is going to look a little bit different for every person, but I just wanted to kind of get on here and talk a little bit about what that process has looked like for me and is hopefully going to look like in the future, in an attempt to be helpful, I guess, to other writers.
Buckle up because this one is a bit of a rant and we're probably going to be here for a little while. And I just wanted to warn you of that ahead of time. Hi, if you're new here, my name is Julia Whitmer. I am the middle grade fantasy author of the Ophelia Run series, and I love talking about all things writing, story, reading, and fantasy. So if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, go ahead and click the subscribe button. And yeah, let's get started. So, I wanted to talk a little bit today about the process of moving on when it comes to a story. I think sometimes it can be really difficult to know when is the time to like set a book down and stop writing it. And when I set it down and stop writing it, do I have to never come back to it, or can I come back to it at some point, or like how do I know? How am I supposed to know? Because I started writing this fantasy novel when I was, oh gosh, I think I started like plotting it when I was like 10 and started writing it when I was like 11, right? So obviously that first draft was not very good. And then I spent the next 10-ish years, I'll say 8, about the next 8 years revising it over and over and over and over and over and over again. I rewrote it from scratch like 3 times, like just completely started over, edited it some, changed the tense, changed the perspective a little bit. Like it wasn't first person. I mean, it wasn't third person, and then I moved it over to first person, which I dreaded the idea of, but I did change it and it made it better. I entered it into a contest and I got runner up. I like had a basically editor look over it and edit it for me. I had so many critique partners look over it. I was going to publish this book. This was going to be my first published novel, and I was convinced. I was like, this is the book that the world needs to see. Um, I was going to, like, I'd been doing all this research into traditional publishing, and I was going to submit it to agents, and I was going to go through the whole traditional publishing process. And in case you hadn't caught on, that did not happen. I am independently published, and I have published 3 novels, none of which are this fantasy book, because this fantasy book, working title Ever Ending, is a story about Death Incarnate and his siblings, Life, Time, Dreams, and his sister Ella, and their fight for the truth. And that's like a really vague description. I don't want to give away too much because I do maybe someday want to publish it. Um, but now is not that time. So there's a little bit of a glimpse into the future because I did just say that I'm planning on someday publishing it, maybe. And so let's dive into like what that looks like and how you make that decision and how to know when to step aside. I have not worked on Everending in, I don't know, since freshman year of college, so probably about 4 years. And there was a time that the idea of that would have just, I would have been just dead inside at the idea of not being part of this world and these characters anymore, even if it was just for a time. Like that would have been a tragedy to me, understandably, because I put so much time into that story. But at some point I had to make the decision, like, this has progressed as much as it can for the knowledge and understanding that I have of writing and storytelling and character development, all of this. And so I need to go work on something else and learn with another story. And then maybe someday I can come back to this. One of the reasons that I moved on from the story was honestly because I was tired of it. Like when I say I edited it over and over and over again, I mean, I counted not that long ago, and I believe Everending has been through 32 drafts, 3 of which were complete rewrites from scratch, all over the course of about, yeah, 8 to 10 years. Because again, I wrote it when I was 11. It wasn't that good. It had the bones. It had the bones because the heart of the story was definitely there. And I think that there's something really magical and beautiful about the brain of a kid that is unaffected by having read like a bunch of other stories or a bunch of other worlds. Like it's just pure imagination and pure inspiration. And so in that way, there is something redeemable about the story, and I knew that, so I kept working on it, but then I was just tired of it. Like, I was exhausted. I was like, I've read this book 30 times. Like, I haven't even read my favorite book 30 times. I've only read my favorite book like 5 or 6 times, and that's a lot. I'm a rereader, but like 30 times, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. So I was exhausted, and I was like, I never want to look at this book again. Like I can see exactly what needs to change to make it like finally better and finished. But I am exhausted of this story and I don't want to be here anymore. So that was one of the things that led me to stepping back. Another reason was that I was just completely overwhelmed by life and commitments. And I mean, like I said, I had just started college, so I was a freshman in college, and I got myself in over my head, being like, I can do everything all at once. And it's like, okay, but you have schoolwork to do, you know? So I had to kind of put my writing in general aside for a while and take a step back from it. And I worked a little bit, on and off on a couple of different projects. It was during my time in school that I published my first book, A Wilted Willow. And then it was also during school that I wrote the first Ophelia Brown book, but I had written it originally as a novella. I didn't think it would end up being a full length novel. And I wrote it for school, like it was for a class because I was a creative writing minor. So I was writing and I was learning, but I was doing it for school. I wasn't doing it like as a creative passion. Really, I think the biggest kicker for why I ended up stepping back was because I could see what needed to change. Like I said, like I could see what needed to change, but I did not have the energy or the passion or the dedication to make those changes anymore. I was just exhausted of the story. I was ready to put my brain towards something else, like literally anything else. I was like, please, anything but this. Alternatively, if I had been at a point where I could no longer see a reason that it could be changed or improved or anything, that would be another good indicator that I needed to take a step back. Because if I'm looking at a story and I'm like, yeah, it's fine, it's good, but it's still not quite clicking, but I can't see why, that's a really good indicator, I think, that it's time to take a step back, put it in a drawer, come back to it in a few weeks, because you're just too close to the story at that point. You're like right here, and the book needs you to step back so you can be like back here and think. And not even think. And that's the thing too. I think it's really important when you step back as well to use that time wisely, because the temptation is to just go, 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 and to pick it up again and not actually step back and to keep thinking about it, to keep plotting it, to keep, I don't know, making character art or doing whatever. And I think there's a proper way to step back from a story and actually take a break from it so that when you come back to it, you can do that well. So, a big question I feel like is, okay, so if I know that I want to step back from the story, how do I know when to come back? Like, how am I supposed to confidently know, okay, it's time for me to sit down and start working on Everending again? And that's something that I'm trying to figure out, because right now, I'm in the middle of a series. I have 5 books in the series to write. I can usually write about a book a year, like write, edit, complete a book in a year. At least I have the last 2. I don't think I could do more than that. So at this point, if I was going to, I feel like I would need to be finished with the series or need to take a year off from the series or do something like that, where I'm like stepping back and not putting that time and effort into that. And I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet, because I really like the series that I'm working on. So right now, Everending is kind of on pause. But the question then is, so when do I come back? Like, what is the plan for that? I think that's a little bit, it's a very person to person kind of question. Like, it's going to be different for everybody. One person might be able to write 3 books in a year. I cannot do that. And if so, they can definitely edit a mostly written book in a year and get it out and also do part of the series. I just think it's important, no matter what I do with the story, that I keep my integrity with my publishing, if that makes sense. So, not completely dropping anything that I've started. So, if I were to come back before I finish the series, I would want to make it super incredibly clear that I'm not giving up on Ophelia Brown because I love that story. I cannot wait for the rest of it. I'm so excited. I cannot wait for the rest of it. But anyways, I got on a tangent there. The real question is, when I do come back to it, what am I going to do differently? Because I've edited it 100 million times. And how am I supposed to like know for sure how to tackle what needs to be tackled and how to do that in a way that doesn't have me editing it for another 10 years, which I'm willing to do if I absolutely have to. Yeah, but how do I know? And so I have like a mental plan of what I'm going to do, and I guess this is my advice for what to do when you step back. One, I think it's really important when you step back from a story to actually step back from it. Like I said, don't think about it at all. I have not been thinking about ever ending at all for like 4 years. And so I know now that it's starting to kind of mull in my brain, now that I'm starting to think about it again, maybe it's time to revisit it a little bit. Maybe it's time to look into it a little bit, because I gave myself the space that I actually needed to know that I wasn't just obsessively thinking about it still over and over and over again like I had been for 10 years. And that is a really encouraging thing to know for sure. Like whether that break had been 2 weeks or a year or 4 years, it doesn't matter. Like I actually took the break. I did not think about it at all. I focused on other projects. And so I know now that it's starting to mull in my brain again. Maybe it is time to revisit it. Maybe it is time to think about it a little bit more. Maybe it's time to start it from scratch one last time. Whatever it is, I think it's important to give yourself that space so that you can let your brain take a full, complete break. And then you know for sure when you come back to it that it's because you're passionate about it and because the story needs you again. So when I do go back to it, my first plan is to reread it from scratch again with absolutely no editing, no line editing, not even thinking about the plot, like no redoing anything, just like if I picked any old book off the shelf, because I have this habit of starting to edit, and then I lose sight of the big picture, the big story. And I know this story through and through. Trust me, I really do. And you might know your story through and through, but I think it's really good to start completely like you've never read it before. Like just like you've never seen it before. Like you picked it up off of the shelf in a bookstore and you're like, oh, that looks interesting. And you start reading through it as objectively as possible. And this is going to be really hard, I think, but something I really think I need to do with the story because I've been with it so long is look at it and ask myself, what characters actually need to be here? What plot points actually need to be here? What is the world even like? Like what's communicated through what is written? Um, and what about the characters is communicated through what is written? Because I know this world so well. I know these characters so well, but I've read it and rewritten it 30 plus times. So the question then is that being communicated properly? And I think I've had a long enough break. I might be able to look at that more objectively than I was able to when I was just reading it back to back to back and rewriting it over and over and over again. I also think it's going to be really hard to look objectively at the characters and be like, yeah, no, this person doesn't actually need to be here because they've been there since draft one, you know what I mean? And I have been brutal in previous edits. I have gotten rid of whole like plot points, whole stopping points, all of that. But I don't know that I've been brutal enough. And so I need to go into this thinking about it objectively, asking myself, does this character need to be here? Does this character need to look this way? Does this character need to speak this way? Is this who they actually are? Because I think there's a lot of things that I just hadn't thought about because I wrote it when I was 11 years old, and I was like, okay, I know that you're like really latching on to this character looking this way, sounding this way, talking this way, walking this way, whatever. But is that who they really are or need to be for the story, or is that who they have been, and so that's who you're comfortable with them being? So from there, once I've read it from scratch again, I'll go back to the very beginning and start implementing some of the things that I might have noticed while I was reading through. um Although I'm not planning on like writing down point by point unless I absolutely have to, because sometimes I get that itch, and I just have to. But I also have editing notes from the last time that I was going to read through it and completely change everything. And so I'll be looking back over those things and seeing, is that still relevant? Do I think that still needs to change? And if so, how do I change that? How do I do that? And then trying to implement those edits. Once I'm done with that, I plan on sending it to a fresh set of eyes, someone who's absolutely never read it before. You know, my mom has read this book probably like 5 times, and she's really good at giving me objective, critical feedback. That's one of the things I love about her. She's a homeschooling mom. She knows how to give objective feedback in a loving way. But she's read it so much that, like, honey, it's time for some new eyes. And I have a lot of really good friends who've read it, and they're also writers and editors and all of that. But I think it'll be time for a developmental edit overhaul. And as much as I'm like, I'd rather not pay money for an edit. I think it's important. I think it's important. If possible, I might have find like a beta reader that I can send it to first, and then once I have that feedback and I've implemented that, then I'll pay for an editor rather than going straight to the paid editor. But I don't know. I'm still figuring that out. You do you, you know? Then, maybe this should have been earlier, but then I need to decide, and this is the tough one. I think the biggest challenge for all writers. I need to decide if I'm ready to publish the story or if maybe, just maybe, this story is just for me. And that is something that I'm trying to figure out now. I'm thinking about now, especially before I pay for an edit. But it's something that's been on my mind a lot because just because I've spent the time on the story does not inherently mean everyone needs to see it. And truthfully, if I'm too emotionally attached, like if you're too emotionally attached to your story, it might be better not to show it to the world. If you can't receive critical feedback, if you can't stand the idea of someone giving you a 1-star review, then you need to not publish it. And that's okay. Like it's okay for a story to just be for you. That's fine. Even the ones that you spend a lot of time and energy investing yourself into.
Editing Juliet here, but a good way to figure out if you're ready for the world to see it is to look back at the feedback you're getting from your beta readers and ask yourself, like, how are you responding to their critiques? Are you denying everything that they're saying? Are you arguing with their points even if it's just in your head? Like, does it hurt your feelings every time they suggest something could be better than it is? Or are you actually willing to hear them out? Because if you can't accept feedback from a beta reader, you probably aren't ready for feedback from the rest of the world. But yeah, thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
It's entirely a reader's right to give harsh feedback on a book that they paid for and spent a lot of time in, especially because Everending right now sits at like a little over 100,000 words. Like it's much bigger than any of the books that I've published so far. So yeah, that's a big time investment. It's a big financial investment. And so it's always a reader's right to give whatever critical feedback they want as soon as I put it out into the world, right? Like as soon as I'm putting it out in the world, I'm letting go. I'm saying it's not mine anymore, it's ours. It's the collective we. And if that is so, then I cannot be upset if I get negative feedback. And so if I'm too emotionally close to this story, then it would be better for me not to publish it than to publish it and then get upset or hurt or like downtrodden because someone didn't like my story, or maybe no one likes my story, you know? Like that's always, anytime you publish a book, there is always a chance that someone's going to read it and be like, this was the worst thing I've ever read. And then the next person's going to think that too, and then the next and the next and the next, and you end up with a 1-star rating on Goodreads. You know what I mean? Like there's always a chance for that. I don't think that would happen because my mom's going to give it 5 stars, you know? She's been with it long enough. She's stuck with it. But there is a chance that everyone will read it and absolutely hate it, and I need to be willing to make that sacrifice. So those are just some tips, I guess, on figuring out if it's time to step back from your story and how to step back from your story and what to do when you come back to it. In the meantime, I think it's always important to be working on something else, kind of like I talked about before. So, for example, right now, in the meantime, while I am trying to decide if I want to pick Everending back up or if I want to do something else, I am not reading Everending at all. Like I said, I am completely stepping back from it. I'm not putting any time into it. I don't think about it. Like, I think I've maybe revisited a scene once or twice in the last 4 years. That is it, just to read it because I was like, oh, I remember that. Was it as good as I remembered? Shocker. Sometimes. Mostly not, but sometimes. I'm also reading lots of books on craft and like reading lots of books in my genre. Because I think that's really important as a writer as well. Like I said, my skill had kind of gotten to a level where I didn't have anywhere else to go. Like I didn't have anywhere to move forward. And so I needed to take a step back and practice the craft. And I am not an expert in the craft. I will never be an expert in the craft, but I definitely have improved since the last time that I looked at Ever Ending. And so I think taking that time to read and read and read and read is definitely helping to improve my writing. Even though I don't read as much as a lot of readers read. My goal is to read 12 books this year, and I'm a book behind, but I think I can catch up, you know? So all that saying, I'm not like the most avid reader in the world, but I do think reading is important. And so I read as much as I can, as much as I have the energy to, as much as I have the time to. And I think that that's really important, not to bog yourself down with like, oh, I can't believe you're not reading more. How could you not read more? But just like let yourself take the time to read. Choose to read over watching TV every now and then, get through a book. It's okay. And then something else that I'm doing that I think is really important is writing a lot of other stories, like a lot of other stories. So I've been writing lots of short stories, lots of like flash fiction, poetry. I'm working, like I said, on the Ophelia Brown books. It's a 5-book series. I just published book 2 out of 5, and so I'm starting to work on book 3. I am brainstorming a standalone fantasy novel. I am brainstorming some dystopian novels. So I've got a lot churning in my mind, and I have not stopped writing just because I stopped writing that. I think that that's really important, like pouring your time into something else. Don't be afraid to pour your time into something else just because you spent a lot of time on another project. You can do it. I believe in you. You can do this. So obviously this process is going to look a little bit different for every person, but I just wanted to kind of get on here and talk a little bit about what that process has looked like for me and is hopefully going to look like in the future, in an attempt to be helpful, I guess, to other writers who are just trying to figure out like, what do I do with my story? Is it time to step back? And truthfully, it might be, it might be time. If you're exhausted, if you are tired of the story, if you can't see a way to change it, or if you're overwhelmed by how much you feel like you need to change, if you don't have a lot of time, maybe it's time to step back, and that's okay. It's always helpful to give yourself the space that you need from your story so that you can make it really truly good. And even more importantly than that, I think to an extent, is stepping back so that you can know, can I take criticism on this? Like, is this something that I can handle criticism on? Because if not, then I can spend as much time as I want. I'm not telling you not to spend time on it, but maybe don't publish it, you know? Don't show it to the rest of the world until you're ready to take criticism. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. That will probably be a while from now because I'm taking a hiatus, so I'm going to be kind of away for a little while, and I'll be back probably in January just because I've got some life stuff going on, and yeah, I want to keep up with life over the internet, but hopefully I'll come back soon. And I'm planning on posting a video talking just a little bit about like what I'm planning on doing when I come back. So you might see me one more time before I officially disappear, and I'll probably look exactly the same because I'm not going to go change just to film a different video. But yeah, so thank you so much for wasting your time with me. I really enjoy spending it with you, and I hope you have an absolutely lovely day, and I wish you all of the best in all of your stories. Bye.